Welcome to PenGen's Inkwell podcast. My name is Jen Waters. I hope you enjoy my stories. Gwen the Alligator originated from a dream that I had about an alligator with a party hat on her head. I was walking around for days trying to figure out what to do with this funny alligator from my dream. I decided that possibly she would be waiting in King Arthur's moat for him to return because, according to her, she loved King Arthur more than Guinevere ever did. The idea of Camelot has taken many forms over the years. One of the ways was through President John F. Kennedy, referring to his presidency as a sort of Camelot. While working in Washington, D.C. journalism, I interviewed Senator Ted Kennedy. It was an unplanned interview because I had been sent to an elementary school in Capitol Hill to write a literacy story. I hadn't been informed that senators would be there, so when I showed up and looked across the room, I realized there were senators at the event, but the only person that I recognized was Ted Kennedy. So he was the first person that I interviewed. I figured he was the most newsworthy because he was the brother of the former president of the United States, President John F. Kennedy. I sat down at the tiny kindergarten table in a plastic-colored chair next to him. He was reading to an African-American girl. He started to talk about his brother and how important literacy was to him. And I kept thinking, but your brother was shot. Or are you talking about your other brother who was shot? It was really heartbreaking in some ways. He kept telling me that I needed to meet Maria Shriver, who wrote a book called What's Heaven, who of course is a wonderful journalist. Senator Kennedy passed away not too long after that. My rhyming poem about Camelot is scored to King Arthur's theme, an original piece of music by Eric Baines. So here's Gwen the Alligator, and I hope she brings you into your own Camelot.
Welcome to King Arthur's castle as it remains. Looking at it now gives me great pains. It's dilapidated and clearly fallen apart. If you only knew how this breaks my alligator heart. Here at Caerleon in southern Wales is a place where fantasy and fancy prevails. Camelot was once alive and thrived. Oh, how I wish the legend would be revived. Since you're a visitor, I'll tell you what I know. Please interrupt me if I'm talking too slow. It's all about a quest for the Holy Grail, the cup from Christ's Last Supper without fail. It was also used to collect the blood from his side at the crucifixion where betrayal applied. That once upon a time an alligator laid an egg. The egg hatched with me leg by leg. Mom named me Guinevere, or Gwen, after the wife of a king who conquered many men. Mama loved legends and daunting tales, folklore galore, and all the small details. King Arthur was Mama's favorite fable. It even involved a circular table. We lived in the moat by his famous castle. Camelot was its name, and it wore a tassel. Guinevere was the wife of Arthur the king. The ruler of Britain gave her his ring. She was as beautiful could be. Noble and gentle and loving high tea. Tragedy struck when Guinevere fell in love with Lancelot, not Arthur, who she gave a shove. I wonder why she liked Lancelot so much. He was brave and loyal to Arthur and such. Guinevere's dad tried to keep them married. Leodegrand gave Arthur the table when harried. Arthur's round table of knights was strong. Gwen must have known her romance was wrong. At first, Lancelot did deeds of honor. Soon enough, Guinevere was a goner. Lancelot saved Gwen from death and danger, so Guinevere decided not to be a stranger. It caused so much turmoil the round table fell. The knights did nothing but fight and yell. The quest for the Holy Grail was less than ideal, but the divine powers thought might have been real. Arthur tried to ignore Guinevere's lies, but then he could see his sudden demise. So he fought Lancelot with his sword and shield. The knights took sides, and no one would yield. Her unfaithful heart destroyed the knights. Their swords slit each other's tights. Before Arthur married, there was a warning. The sun might not rise the next morning. Merlin the wizard told Arthur, "Beware." Arthur didn't listen, and Merlin felt despair. He foresaw the ruin Guinevere would bring, the downfall of the kingdom, every bad thing. Eventually, Guinevere left Lancelot alone. Arthur had pulled Excalibur from the stone, proving that he was meant to be in charge. Guinevere's apology was very, very large. Excalibur the sword was magical with powers. Only Arthur could fight with the blade for hours. He had excellence to run the kingdom with might. He would do what he could to make the wrongs right. From then on, Guinevere decided to be loyal. After all, she was queen and it was royal. The knights of the Round Table were gone. Arthur asked his nephew Mordred to be a pawn. Mordred took charge during a military campaign. Then Mordred started to argue and complain. He began to devise an evil scheme and plot, almost like the chaos that Sir Lancelot brought. Since Arthur was fighting battles in other lands, Mordred thought he could make demands. Mordred wanted Guinevere as his bride. He could rule Britain and as king preside. This time Guinevere didn't take the bait. She refused Mordred's offer without debate. The Tower of London became her new home. She locked herself inside so she couldn't roam. Mordred would have to stay far, far away. Guinevere remembered Arthur without delay. When Arthur returned, he found a surprise. Putting his nephew in charge was unwise. He fought Mordred until he reached his death. But Arthur was wounded. He took his last breath. He journeyed to paradise and beyond. It was almost like Merlin waved his wand. His tomb said, "Here lies Arthur, king that was, king that shall be, and he is great because he fought against evil and kept the land free. He helped those in danger find Jubilee. The Holy Grail was a sovereign quest, but now King Arthur is forever at rest." When Arthur had died, Guinevere felt remorse. She entered a convent and prayed, of course. She helped the poor for the rest of her time and apologized for mistakes in her prime. Lancelot was never again to see her face. She knew she had caused the kingdom disgrace. As years went by, she loved Arthur more. The church buried her body by him for sure. Guinevere and Lancelot lived on in mythology. It had become a classic anthology of mystery, magic, love, and wars, of adventure, betrayal, and swinging doors. Chivalry and fate had touched imagination. Medieval history caused a great fascination. I always tell my friends where I got my name. Now that you know, you'll never be the same. A world in great need maybe will learn. Legend has said one day Arthur will return. Keep your eyes open. If you see him, let me know. I'm waiting for my prince and going with the flow. An alligator's fate is a castle, not a swamp. Don't tell me different or I'll chomp and stomp. King Arthur will find me as a bride to be, a British alligator that shall sing a song to thee. Thank you for your time on your travels today. How I wish I could lengthen your stay. King Arthur will come back one day soon. Till then I'll swim beneath a silver moon. Camelot forever in my heart and in my tail. Long live King Arthur and the Holy Grail.
This has been Pengen's Inkwell Podcast. I wrote and performed all the original stories in the podcast. This podcast is produced by Eric Baines, who scored all the stories and poems in the series to original and public domain music. The podcast is associated with my blog of the same name, Pengen's Inkwell, which can be found on my website, jenwaters.com.